Hello everyone. Welcome to our story. Today, we are going to travel to a small but amazing country called Nepal. The country that people are talking about a lot these days, where the youth, especially Generation Z, have practically carried out a revolution. Nepal is a country full of mountains, rivers, and forests. It is located between two giant countries, India and China, in Asia. Imagine a place where the world's highest mountains, the Himalayas, touch the sky. That's Nepal. People from all over the world come here to see Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth. Also strengthen your English skills, expand your vocabulary, and enjoy a fun and easy way to learn while listening. The people of Nepal are friendly and hardworking. Most of them live in small villages near mountains or rivers. Life here is simple, but their culture is rich. They celebrate many colorful festivals, have traditional music and dances, and respect nature very much. But Nepal is not just about mountains and beauty. It has a long history of kings, rulers, and brave people. Over time, many changes happened here. Today, we will tell you the story of how this beautiful country went through struggles, wars, and finally, a modern movement led by the youth called Generation Z. So, get ready. Let's travel together through the history of Nepal, meet its kings, soldiers, young people, and see how a nation fights for its future. After learning about Nepal's beautiful mountains and kind people, let's go back in time, many centuries ago, to when Nepal was ruled by kings. In ancient times, Nepal was not one single country. It was made up of small kingdoms, each with its own king. Some were strong, some were weak, but all wanted power and control. The kings lived in big palaces and made decisions for their people. Life for ordinary people was very different. They worked on farms, raised animals, and followed the rules of the king. Religion played an important role too. Most people practiced Hinduism or Buddhism, and temples were at the center of every town. People believed that the king ruled because of divine power, given by the gods. But not everything was peaceful. There were fights between kingdoms, and sometimes kings had to protect their land from invaders. Over time, some kingdoms became more powerful and started to unite Nepal under one ruler. This period is very important because it set the foundation for the future of Nepal. The power, traditions, and conflicts of these ancient kingdoms would shape the country for hundreds of years. In the next section, we will explore the culture, beliefs, and daily life of the Nepalese people during these ancient times. You will see how traditions and mountains influenced the lives of kings and ordinary people alike. Now that we know about the kings and kingdoms, let's look at the life of ordinary people and their culture. Nepalese people have a very rich culture. Most of them follow Hinduism or Buddhism, and their religion shapes almost every part of their life. They pray at temples, celebrate colorful festivals, and respect the mountains, rivers, and animals. For example, festivals like Dashain and Tihar are full of joy, music, and family gatherings. People dance, sing, and share food with friends and neighbors. Even in small villages high in the mountains, festivals bring everyone together. Art and crafts are also very important. People make wood carvings, statues, and paintings for temples and homes. Music is everywhere. Traditional drums, flutes, and singing tell stories about gods, heroes, and history. Life is not easy, especially for farmers. But through hard work, community, and strong beliefs, they survive and keep their culture alive. The culture and beliefs of Nepal create a deep connection between the people and their land. The mountains, rivers, and forests are not just nature, they are part of daily life, traditions, and identity. In the next section, we will go to the 19th century, when foreign powers and modern changes started affecting Nepal, changing the country forever. As time passed, Nepal could not stay completely isolated from the world. In the 19th century, neighboring British India started to have more influence in the region. Nepal was small, but it was important because of its strategic location between India and China. The British wanted peaceful relations with Nepal, and they also hired Nepalese soldiers, called Gurkhas, who became famous for their courage and loyalty. At the same time, life in Nepal was still traditional. Most people lived in villages, farms, and small towns. The kings continued to rule with strict control, and ordinary people had little voice in the government. Foreign influence brought some changes. Trade increased, new ideas came from outside, and the kings had to adapt to a changing world. But these changes were small, and Nepal remained mostly a kingdom of mountains and traditions. This century is important because it prepared Nepal for modern challenges. The seeds of political change, education, and outside influence began to grow here. In the next section, we will see the beginning of the 20th century, when people started demanding freedom and democracy. As the 20th century began, the people of Nepal started to dream of freedom and change. Life under the kings was still strict, and most people had little say in their government. Small groups of activists and thinkers began talking about democracy, rights, and fairness. They wanted a country where people could speak freely and have a voice in decisions. At the same time, the world around Nepal was changing. Countries were becoming more modern, and ideas like education, equality, and reform spread. Nepalese students who studied abroad brought new ideas back to their villages and towns. But change was not easy. The kings and ruling elites did not want to lose power. People who spoke up often faced punishments or were ignored. Still, the desire for freedom and a better life grew stronger each year. This period is important because it set the stage for future movements. It was the beginning of a long journey that would eventually lead to the end of absolute monarchy in Nepal. In the next section, we will explore the major events leading to the end of absolute rule and the rise of democracy in Nepal. By the mid-20th century, the people of Nepal had enough of kings ruling without their opinion. After decades of small protests and activism, large movements for democracy began. In 1951, a major change happened. The king was forced to share power with elected leaders, and Nepal moved from absolute monarchy toward a constitutional monarchy. This meant that the king could no longer make all decisions alone, and people started to have some say in government. Life for ordinary people slowly began to change. Schools opened in more villages, newspapers shared new ideas, and the government started to listen to citizens more. However, democracy was still fragile. Political parties fought for power, and sometimes the king tried to take control again. Life was not easy, but the people had hope for the future. This period is important because it marked the first real steps toward a modern Nepal, where ordinary citizens could dream of a voice in their government. In the next section, we will explore the decades of political instability that followed, which prepared the country for future conflicts and reforms. After the end of absolute monarchy, Nepal entered a period of political ups and downs. Although democracy had arrived, it was fragile and weak. New political parties formed, and leaders fought for power. Sometimes governments were short-lived, changing every few months. Ordinary people did not always see improvements in their lives. Roads, schools, and hospitals were slow to develop. The king still had some influence and sometimes tried to intervene in politics. This created tension between the monarchy and the elected government. During these years, Nepal faced many challenges: economic struggles, corruption, and disagreements among leaders. People grew frustrated, and young generations began to dream of a stronger and fairer government. This period is important because it prepared the stage for bigger movements, including the rise of rebel groups and youth activism. The seeds of change were slowly growing in the hearts of ordinary Nepalese. In the next section, we will explore the Maoist insurgency and the start of the Civil War, a turning point in Nepalese history. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Nepal faced a serious conflict. A group called the Maoists started an armed rebellion against the government. They wanted major changes, including ending poverty and corruption. The civil war lasted for about 10 years, from 1996 to 2006. Thousands of people lost their lives, and many villages were damaged or abandoned. Ordinary citizens suffered, but the Maoists gained support from some young and poor people who wanted real change. During this time, the government struggled to control the country. The king tried to regain more power, but neither side could fully win. The war caused fear and uncertainty, but it also showed that the people of Nepal were tired of corruption and unfair rule. Finally, in 2006, the civil war ended with a peace agreement. This agreement brought hope for a new Nepal, where the monarchy would lose its absolute power, and citizens could have a stronger role in government. This period is important because it changed the political landscape forever. It paved the way for the end of monarchy and the rise of a republic, giving power to the people. After the peace agreement of 2006, Nepal took a historic step. The country officially ended its monarchy and became a republic. For the first time in centuries, the king no longer ruled the nation. The people celebrated this new beginning. Citizens could now vote freely, and political parties worked together to create a new constitution. Schools, roads, and public services slowly began to improve. However, the new republic faced many challenges. Political leaders often disagreed, and governments were short-lived. Corruption remained a problem, and ordinary people sometimes felt ignored. Still, the dream of democracy was alive. Nepalese citizens, especially the youth, began to believe in their power to shape the future. This period showed that even after wars and struggles, people could rebuild their country. In the next section, we will look at the fragile democracy and rise of corruption, which set the stage for the Generation Z movement. After becoming a republic, Nepal had hope and excitement. Citizens could vote and participate in shaping the country. But soon, reality showed how fragile democracy could be. Political parties often argued and fought for power instead of working for the people. Some leaders misused government money, accepted bribes, and made decisions that benefited only themselves. Ordinary citizens began to feel frustrated and powerless. Roads were still bad, schools lacked resources, and hospitals struggled. Many young people thought, why should we trust the government? Despite these challenges, the dream of change did not die. Young generations, who were connected to social media and the internet, began to talk about justice, fairness, and accountability. This period is important because it created the conditions for a new movement, a movement led by the youth of Nepal, Generation Z, who would demand real change. In the next section, we will meet the youth of Nepal and the early signs of the Generation Z movement, which would change the country forever. By the 2010s and early 2020s, a new generation of Nepalese youth was growing up. They were called Generation Z, young people born with the internet, smartphones, and social media. This generation saw the problems around them: corruption, weak governments, and slow development. They wanted change, but they had new tools to fight for it. Instead of only protesting in the streets, they used social media to share information, organize events, and raise awareness. Schools and universities became places where young people talked about democracy, fairness, and accountability. They believed in their power to demand a government that works for the people. Generation Z started small, with online campaigns, videos, and hashtags. But soon, their voice grew louder, reaching every corner of the country. They showed that even young people with no official power could influence the future of Nepal. In the next section, we will explore how these young people began organizing protests and challenging the government directly. As Generation Z grew stronger, young people began organizing protests. At first, these were small gatherings in universities and public squares, but their ideas quickly spread online. They protested against corruption, weak governance, and unfair policies. Social media became their main platform. Videos, posts, and hashtags connected thousands of young Nepalese across cities and villages. Even though the government tried to ignore them, these protests inspired more youth to join. They showed that even ordinary students and young workers could demand accountability. These early actions were the first signs of a larger movement. They set the stage for massive demonstrations that would eventually shake the government and change Nepal's future. In the next section, we will see how the protests grew into a nationwide movement and attracted international attention. As time went on, the protests of Generation Z spread across Nepal. Students, young workers, and even some older citizens joined the movement. Major cities like Kathmandu saw hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets. Their demands were clear. End corruption. Hold politicians accountable. Ensure fair governance. Social media amplified their voice. Videos of peaceful protests, chants, and speeches were shared around the world. The government could no longer ignore the movement. At the same time, these protests were mostly peaceful, showing the world that the youth wanted real change without violence. The pressure on the leaders grew daily. The people of Nepal, inspired by their youth, began to believe in the power of their collective voice. In the next section, we will see how the government reacted and how tensions increased, leading to a historic moment in Nepalese politics. As the protests grew, the Nepalese government faced immense pressure. Politicians were divided, and some tried to dismiss the youth movement, calling it small or unimportant. But the reality was clear: the voice of Generation Z could not be ignored. The Prime Minister and top officials tried negotiations, but they failed to satisfy the protesters. Promises were made, but corruption and weak governance continued, frustrating the people even more. Tensions rose when demonstrations blocked major roads and public spaces. The country faced a political crisis, with newspapers, TV, and social media full of debates and protests. International observers also watched closely, as Nepal's situation reflected the power of young people in modern democracy. This period is crucial because it set the stage for a historic change. The Prime Minister realized that without stepping down or reforming the system, the unrest would continue and possibly escalate. In the next section, we will explore the resignation of the Prime Minister and the fall of the government. Under the continuous pressure from Generation Z and widespread protests, the Prime Minister of Nepal finally resigned. After months of demonstrations, public anger, and political instability, the government could no longer ignore the demands of the people. This resignation was a historic moment. For the first time, young people had directly influenced the highest levels of government. Ordinary citizens celebrated in the streets, sharing videos and photos online. With the Prime Minister stepping down, the parliament was temporarily dissolved, and the president appointed an interim government. This new government's main task was to prepare for new elections and restore stability in the country. The fall of the government showed the power of youth activism. Generation Z had proven that even in a country with decades of political challenges, change was possible. In the next section, we will look at the role of social media and technology in helping Generation Z achieve these results. One of the most important reasons Generation Z succeeded in Nepal was technology. Young people used social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok to spread their message quickly. Videos of protests, speeches, and peaceful marches went viral, reaching millions of people across the country. Even in remote villages, young Nepalese could join the movement online. Technology also helped organize large-scale demonstrations without central planning. Young activists could coordinate locations, share safety tips, and support each other through messaging apps. International media started covering the protests, which added pressure on the government. The world was watching, and this made politicians care more about public opinion. This section is important because it shows how modern tools like social media empower young people to change a nation, even against strong and established governments. In the next section, we will explore how ordinary citizens supported Generation Z and joined the movement. As Generation Z continued protesting, more ordinary citizens began to support their cause. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and office workers joined the movement, showing that it was not just a youth issue, it was a national concern. In cities and villages alike, people organized rallies, shared stories, and encouraged young activists. The movement grew larger and stronger, covering streets, schools, and workplaces. This widespread support made the government even more vulnerable. Politicians realized that ignoring the protests was no longer an option. The unity between Generation Z and ordinary citizens demonstrated a powerful truth: when people come together, they can demand accountability and change. In the next section, we will explore how the government tried to respond and what led to the final collapse. As protests continued to grow, the government tried one last time to control the situation. Officials held meetings, promised reforms, and attempted negotiations with youth leaders. But these actions were too little, too late. Generation Z and the public had lost trust. People demanded real action, not empty promises. Finally, the Prime Minister resigned, and the parliament was temporarily dissolved. The government that had ruled for years in a weak and corrupt way could no longer function. This collapse was historic. It showed that persistent, peaceful activism, combined with technology and public support, could change an entire nation. Generation Z had reshaped Nepalese politics, and the country was entering a new era. After the collapse of the previous government, the President of Nepal appointed an interim government to manage the country. This temporary government was responsible for keeping the country stable and preparing for new elections. The people of Nepal had high hopes. They wanted fair elections, honest leaders, and a government that truly serves the citizens. Schools, universities, and young activists were optimistic that their efforts had created real change. Even though challenges remained, like corruption and political disagreements, the interim government was a bridge to a better future. For the first time, many people believed that Generation Z and ordinary citizens could shape the nation together. This period shows that hope and persistence can bring real results, even in countries with long histories of political struggle. In the final section, we will look at the overall impact of Generation Z on Nepal and the lessons learned. The movement led by Generation Z changed Nepal forever. Young people showed that even without formal power, they could influence politics, challenge corruption, and demand accountability. The protests inspired ordinary citizens to participate and believe in their own power. Social media and technology proved to be key tools in modern activism, allowing information to spread quickly and widely. Nepal now faces a new chapter. The interim government is working toward fair elections, and the youth remain engaged and hopeful. The story of Nepal teaches us that persistence matters. Change may take years, but steady effort can succeed. Unity is powerful. When young people and ordinary citizens work together, governments listen. Technology can amplify voices. Modern tools give citizens the power to organize and share ideas. Generation Z has shown the world that hope, courage, and determination can reshape a nation. And now, the future of Nepal rests in the hands of its people, especially its young generation, who have proven that they are ready to build a fair and strong democracy. Thank you so much for listening to our story until the very end. In this story, you not only learn the history of Nepal and how its government changed over time, but you also had the chance to practice and improve your English along the way. Nepal is a country of mountains, courage, and resilience, and its people remind us that hope and determination can shape the future. I hope you enjoyed this journey, and don't forget, stay curious and keep learning. See you in the next video.